this coming year is going to be the first AI elections for the US and for the UK. This is going to be the first time we see AI being used to influence.
You heard it here first. First AI elections.
Yes.
Robots are being elected.
Hopefully. I think it would probably do a better job.
Resistance is futile.
Welcome to the podcast.
Where we explore what's happening with AI, business, automation and culture and ask,
where on earth is all this going? Jamie.
Dave.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
AI in politics, who controls the algorithms? That's what we're going to be exploring.
Okay.
Hot button issues like data privacy.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Sexy.
Fake news, though.
Yeah, that is
big
interesting.
issue, right?
Yeah.
And democracy in the digital age.
Okay.
These are the sorts of things that we want to talk about here, where the rubber meets the tarmac for AI and democracy generally.
Yep.
So I want you to think about Sam Altman, right?
Yep.
Because he
He's a
seems
nice
nice
guy.
enough. Nice guy,
Yeah,
right?
Nice guy.
OpenAI
Yep.
CEO, seems like a nice guy. I won't pretend that he's got some Machiavellian agenda.
Yep.
But what if the guy that comes after him isn't so good?
Yep.
So who controls the AI technology,
Yep.
or at least who's influencing it,
Yep.
matters massively.
Absolutely, yes.
I think the way to look at this issue is to reverse, if not reverse, let's give Sam Altman a personality and a citizenship that's totally different. Okay, so let's say his name was Li Wei.
Okay.
And instead of ChatGPT, he was the head of a Chinese-based tech startup funded by Huawei and
Yep.
the Chinese government.
Yep.
Okay, the aim of it was to tighten the grip of state control and search requests.
Yep.
Maybe even give some inquiries a subtle bit of propaganda twist in an all too human way.
Yeah, yeah.
So it all feels nice.
Yeah. Subtle.
Yeah, and subtle, but yeah, or even then export that technology to other authoritarian-leaning countries.
Yeah. All in it together.
Yeah. So how would we feel if the Sam Altman experience was viewed from overseas, basically?
I think we'd be worried.
We would be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the idea that this is not a problem to other countries
Yes.
politically
Yeah.
means that there's got to be. It's not a question of if there's an AI information war going on.
Yeah.
It's when did it start?
Yes.
And how far advanced are we?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that should help maybe frame the issue,
Okay.
so that it's not going to stop just because, say, Sam Altman says, actually we will
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
pause for 6 months.
Yeah.
The genie was out of the bottle years ago. It's just that it's become much more public
Yes.
now. So talking about this in that framework, we'll see. Look, the Chinese government and the Chinese big companies have been working on this for years. In
Yep.
fact, many argue that they're ahead.
Further ahead. Definitely.
Because they've got the data.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So they've got the population and the
Yeah.
data to really have a handle on this, and perhaps they are, I presume, exporting that technology to friends and allies.
Yes.
So we're in a war of sorts
Yep.
already.
Yep.
And this stuff will accelerate. And yes, of course, there's the potential for benign developments to come out of it, but we've got to really grapple with the idea that a Cambridge Analytica on steroids
Yes.
is a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And so that's what we want to explore. So how do we get into this? What's your, first of all, on that whole issue, what is your Skynet versus Knight Rider sort of 1 to 10 sort of scale of worry? Is this in
I'm halfway. Because I don't know. This.
Well, halfway C-3PO is useful but annoying. I think this is
Yes, slightly higher. It's a little bit further up.
there.
Yeah, but it could go either way. And I think this is probably going to be the greatest challenge and the topic that needs to be looked at the most, because who do you rely on to make these decisions? Is it the government to make these decisions? Is it the technology companies, the large technology companies, of which they all have different agendas? My skepticism with the government is that they can't even control things already. Online pornography of kids and the impact of social media on teenagers, that type of thing.
Outside of China,
Yeah,
that's the problem.
yeah. So that China's the other way of dealing with it, which is you lock everything down, you control everything, and if they can't even control that yet in kind of the Western world, how on earth are they going? They're so far behind, and that's my biggest concern. So then what they do is I suppose, it kind of outsource some of that decision making and agenda to the technical companies or people who are in tech, but they have their own agendas, profit and more users and more subscribers. So I think this is going to be a real battlefield, for want of a better word, in terms of how this gets done. Someone said something recently at this APPG event in Parliament, and it was like the most important decision is who is in the room when these decisions are being made. And we're not just talking about politicians, not just talking about tech, but actually, real human beings like you and me, people in industry, people, in public sector, teachers, nurses, doctors, because this has its fingers in everything. These do need to be part of that conversation.
That's something that was talked about in Suleiman's book, The Next Wave,
Yes.
about perhaps having some form of democratic accountability. And he suggested community assemblies. I think, no, that's not the right term.
Like
but
town hall kind of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to get engagement.
Absolutely.
And at the level of democracy that you need for that, you really have to have it kind of global. You can't just do this in little nation states. And I think that's one of the things that I think is really challenging about this, because you're talking about things that would need to be regulated at a global level, or at least a global agreement level.
Yeah.
So the idea that country level community meetings can get together and work this out in one country is fine, but of course the coordinating all that would be huge. So really what you're likely to get is a couple of countries might really, probably the Nordic countries who really pro-social on these sorts of things, might get together and go, look, we've got this protocol, and everybody else goes, yeah, we'll just vote it through Parliament or whatever. But the idea that it could be global and coordinated, it seems very far-fetched at this stage, but may be possible with these better digital tools.
Look at social media as an example. Social media is something which they know is causing problems for teens and for kids, and in terms of image, in terms of how they feel, their mental health, that type of thing. Yeah. This is a global problem. Okay, you could say maybe not in China because it's so locked down, but it's a global problem, and there is no global consensus. And what happens is, as soon as they put controls in somewhere, either the companies that run those things move to somewhere that they can run it without having being blocked, or the other side is that in that case, you'll have the kids accessing these things through the back door so that they can still continue to use it. So it's
VPNs,
your VPNs, whatever it might be. This really is a big challenge.
Yeah. So that's the challenge overall. I wondered if there's a local version of that we could talk about just for the UK, for example, just to get a handle on the stuff perhaps they were more familiar with.
Yeah.
What are the tools that a government might have, or businesses might have, or individuals might have to I guess insulate themselves at least from the worst of these threats that are, whether it be campaign shenanigans, whether it be a government manipulating information, or just vocal pressure groups manipulating voter sentiment. I mean, what are I guess both, if you can, two sides of the coin here. Maybe just what comes to mind what sort of problems you can see AI presenting, and then also what possible solutions there might be.
So I think the main one is that this coming year is going to be the first AI elections for the US and for the UK. This is going to be the first time we see AI being used to influence.
You heard it here first. First AI elections. Yes. Robots are being elected.
Hopefully. I think it would probably do a better job. Less scandal. So at the moment, we kind of saw this with some of the Trump elections and some of the things that have happened in the UK as well. But that was done when it was algorithms. And by algorithms, we mean, humans having to program things that, if this demographic of people like this and we want to kind of swing their vote, then we should do this. And it's very intensive, and it's very kind of labor intensive and difficult. AI really enables that, to this concept of hyper personalization for the messaging that you're going to be receiving. And hyper personalization is one of the big things of AI anyway, in a whole kind of different realms as well. So the idea is that if a particular political party wants a certain demographic to start voting for them, it will learn very quickly who those people are, and it can go right down. It could be, men aged between 46 and 48 who like wearing black t-shirts with subversive messages on them. It can go really down to a granular level.
For those not watching the video version of this, I've got a black t-shirt on with a simulation, but with the end code symbol.
It's very, very geeky.
Very nerdy.
Very
and you know what? The cheeky thing is I saw it and thought, I like the look of that. And then only afterwards I looked at what it meant. So I'm no coder, but I got a nerd's t-shirt, didn't I? Anyway, there you go.
So what they'll be able to do, what the AI will be able to do, is hyper-personalize the messages to such a granular level to specific people, because it understands what those people like, what they've been looking at, what their political sway is, and it can influence them in a language using imagery that would really work on them. It's kind of marketing, but used in that way.
And would the experience on the receiving end be like, obviously this is a robot talking to me, or not?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's
Exactly.
going to be. When you look on Twitter or X, or when you look on Facebook or Instagram and things like that, you know that it's being curated for you. But we tend to be okay with that. That's why there's popular. People don't really think, I'm not going to use that because it's doing that, or maybe a very small demographic do that.
If it's still compelling,
yeah,
you're going to engage with it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to be so subtle as well. So it's not going to be obvious that you're getting all these adverts from a particular political party. It's going to be that you start to see stories that are relevant, or comments.
Yeah,
it's going to be so.
Just for you,
yeah.
Here's this toxic message
Yes.
that's been dressed up as a story.
That's right.
That we don't even know is true. You don't know. So in the last election, right, there was lots of people in the States,
Yes.
for example, were talking about these robocalls they were getting.
Right.
And so they were using sophisticated algorithms. Well, it was AI then,
Yeah.
but it was just not called that. And you'd get these calls, incessant calls, seeing if you were voting and so on. But you knew it was a robot.
Yeah.
And at the worst, that was 5. It was C3PO, useful for the pollsters and for the parties, perhaps.
Yeah.
But actually really annoying.
Yeah.
But so people knew it was a bot. Didn't love it, but at least they were aware of the fact that it was a bot, and they could just hang up.
Yes.
So that was just intrusive, annoying, and ultimately probably counterproductive, because if you knew which party it's from, it might
reduce your
interest in voting for them. Whereas this is going to be much more like, you just don't know what stuff this is.
Very, very subtle.
An account that might look like a human being and everything, and it's not.
Well, I mean, although this isn't specifically politics, this gets into the realm of what Meta have just released with their for Instagram, and effectively will be Facebook as well. So they've got the concept of avatars, kind of Meta AI avatars, and these are going to be accounts in Instagram as if it's a person, but it won't be. It'll be an AI, and you can interact with it. You can like the pictures it puts up there. You can comment on it and then get replies and things like that. So imagine that from the kind of political slant on that. It's this real kind of question of where does reality end and fake stuff kind of starts.
Yeah,
and I think that's going to become harder and harder for us to see where those boundaries are.
And so let's talk about some of the things that both you could do as an individual and as a business, and maybe then we'll talk about the bigger stuff.
Yeah.
To protect yourself from it, to perhaps filter it.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about perhaps legislation that might be worth looking at, and the sort of tools that we could ask for.
Yeah.
But what do you think is some of the stuff that people could do for themselves as individuals, or to protect their businesses from all sorts of, well, we're talking about politics here.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's relevant for businesses, but you might have something in mind. But talk about individuals definitely.
Yeah. So I think some of the things that you and I have spoken about is in terms of fact checking and really, the stuff that's coming through. I suppose it's educating yourself to the fact that this may not be real, and not just assuming that what you're reading is real, or what you're hearing or watching on videos is real, and actually go and find the facts for yourself. What worries me is that people don't tend to do that, and I don't think they're going to change. So in terms of some of the tools, we'll get onto the subject of NFTs, which is I don't know a lot about NFTs. I understand the concept of them, and for anyone who's listening, it's the idea that you can effectively mark something as being kind of genuine or from something digitally.
Like a digital watermark.
Yeah, digital watermark is perfect. And potentially when something is done by AI, maybe it's watermarked with the fact that this has been generated, whether it's a red, green or orange, the same way when you go to the supermarket and you buy food and it's the sugar's high or low, it might be something like that. And at least then you have the option of making a decision as to whether you believe that or not believe that.
The thing that you're talking about, though, is that's already something that would need to be negotiated as regulation, right?
Yes,
At least a national level.
Yes.
And I think it was Yuval Noah Harari that brought that up as an idea that at a minimum standard,
Yes.
anything that is AI should be labeled.
Yes.
And that it should not be an escapable optional thing to do.
Yeah.
It should be you by law have to do that.
Yeah.
And of course, we could argue about how does that get enforced and so on.
Yeah.
However, there's lots of things that we've done at a global level because we realised we needed to.
Yes.
Usually after a massive crisis, I'm
Yeah.
afraid. So it's not impossible. It's just that the desire to do it seems low down on the list. And I'm
Yeah.
afraid there probably needs to be something broken before that happens,
the
which is a shame.
There's another flip side. I was at an event, I was on this panel and they asked, it was about deepfakes. And they said, how can we detect whether something is deepfake? And it kind of was the flip side of this, was actually maybe it should be watermarked, digitally watermarked when it's human, and do it that way, because if that way, we are humans. This is real. This is fact checked or whatever, and it's watermarked for that. And then things, if they don't have that, then that it's you
Okay.
have to take your own kind of take on it.
And given that, you could have a AI assisted churn of content
Yes.
much larger than the stuff that humans would make, that's
Yes.
probably more practical as well.
Yes.
So that's an interesting
because in the case of the deep fakes, the question was how can we detect if it's a deep fake? And the reality is, like with cybersecurity, is that it's going to be a cat and mouse game. As soon as there's a tool to detect if it's deep fake, someone will find a way to get around the back of it. But if you say this is by a human, until of course the AI and the bad actors start labeling the non-human stuff as humans.
Yeah, it was at George Burns. Success is all about authenticity. If you
Yeah.
can fake that, you've got it made.
Yeah, that's it.
It's good old George Burns. No one will have heard of him unless they're over 50. Okay, so the tools for mitigating this sort of problem you've talked about don't exist yet and are at the national, at least, level of regulation.
Yeah.
So that's something that we might be able to pressure for, and it might be a solution that people can get behind. But is there anything that you feel people can do apart from their own individual vigilance? There's no sort of filter. There's no VPN for AI
No.
that exists yet. So we're really at the moment, we're in the Wild West, right?
Yep. Yeah. It is. There's nothing that I can think of that does it at the moment. There's plenty of things around cybersecurity, and there's a lot of stuff around. You could think of this kind of like phishing, in cybersecurity, and you have things that detect if it's a phishing email, but even those get bypassed. When they get cleverer and cleverer and cleverer.
Yeah.
I guess you might get something that's like that acts as a bit of a filter to the information. But the problem, I think, is that if you think of it in the terms of email, that is email coming into your productivity program. But a lot of this stuff is going to be social media. So unless the social media company decides that they want to protect you against that, then you can't do much. You can't layer anything really over the top of that.
So we're screwed.
Yeah.
AI expert says we're screwed. That's the end of the show. All right. Well, look, I think in that sense, let's go to, if we had a magic wand, we could go to the global level and set regulations that even the Chinese would want to be involved in. I say even the Chinese, but they're the other side of the coin here.
Yeah.
Where they've got a very different approach to data.
Yes.
And so the recent sort of summit, the Bletchley Park summit, included China, which I think is very important to do.
Yeah, it was topical.
To get at least international leaders talking about this issue. And I think what came out of that was signing of a protocol, at least, of like, we need to have some AI safety.
Yes.
So it was at the level of, okay, look, it might be a problem, and probably we'll probably do something probably one day.
Well, when I went to the follow-up event to that, it was interesting. There's a few people that were there as well. We were talking afterwards, and they were saying there's a lot of people talking about what maybe we should be doing, and maybe we should do this, and maybe we should, but no one's actually committing to anything really, like nothing concrete.
Again, that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's because we're in an AI war,
Yes.
and everybody's positioning
Yeah, yeah.
themselves to see what the advantage is
Yeah.
and what's the disadvantage.
Yes.
And that does, worry me. Maybe I'm easily worried, but in the sense that, if you've got people just setting up for the fall or some crisis and then they'll react to it,
Yeah.
which seems to be the default position
Yep.
with new developments like this,
Yes.
then, politically it could be like a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, it's collateral damage, isn't it? All these people that
Yeah.
are going to have to
And we have
suffer.
a first Hiroshima, and then we go, actually,
Yeah.
do you know what? Maybe nuclear weapons should have maybe some sort of
Yes.
protocol around it
Yeah.
or whatever.
There was someone raised a good point, which made me think about this kind of stuff when I was at this event, and their argument was that rather than wait, what we should do is find out what everyone wants and then design it, because we're at a point now where we can design the AI kind of how we want it to work. And what came to mind was, and I went and Googled it afterwards, was I think it was Henry Ford's quote. Something like, if you'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Yes.
Something along the lines of that.
Understand.
And it kind of, then again, you get kind of butting up against this. You get innovation versus, if we ask everyone what they want for AI, okay, we might end up with something, but it's not going to necessarily be innovative because it needs something that's not what we're currently doing to work.
Can it be the negatives? Can we, with the things that we want,
Yes.
or the not wants?
Yes.
Here's the things we don't want.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right.
Maybe you don't know what we don't want.
I think the only things that feel different as time, as it were, is it feels much bigger and harder to get a handle on what the crisis it might cause
Yes.
would look like.
Yeah.
Yet it does feel like that there's something that's inescapable there,
Yeah.
that we just haven't encountered yet.
Yeah.
Do you see it possible that in 10 or 15 years' time, though, we could look back and go, oh, those worries about political implications of AI, they were way overblown. What we worried about, it was no big deal, and we just breeze on through?
No. This is the short
That's pretty
answer.
clear.
Yeah.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
I think
It's a really short podcast today.
Yeah. Do you think? No. No, because we've all seen how much of an impact that it's having so far, and we're literally just at the. Funnily enough, I looked in my diary. It was on the 6th of December last year that I first sent a message to my business partner saying, "Have you seen this thing, ChatGPT?" That's how far we've come in 1 year, and because of that, and it's if it was just a fleeting thing, it wouldn't still be in the news all the time. There wouldn't be summits. There wouldn't be all this stuff going on. I mean, we're at the beginning. We're at the foothills. So no, I don't think it's something that we're going to look back and go, that was
Yeah.
Look how we worried.
At least on the politics, on democracy, it's a to be advised moment that we're in, and all we can do really is try to shape the likely places where problems will pop up.
Yes.
And do what we can to make people aware of them, I guess. And so
Yeah.
in that sense, it's almost on the nerds, which I'm adjacent to nerds in that I'm
Really?
interested in this stuff. And I may sound like a nerd interest, but I don't have the technical or mechanical ability in this space. It's not my area.
Yes.
It's just that I see what's going on. I'm fascinated with it. And I think it's up to total nerds and nerd adjacent people like me.
Yeah. Nerd
to-
adjacent. I like that. That's a new
to bring this up
Yeah.
and try to make it available and accessible in language that people can talk about socially.
Yes.
And to make these concerns valid. I think because that's something I notice. It's not so much that people are dismissive. It's just that the concerns, there's tons of other things going on in the world that are very worrying. And why should this be a priority?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it ought to be the priority, but to have a zero priority, especially when it comes to democracy,
Yes.
just really feel like that's too much complacency.
Yeah, and also I think to play into that as well is the kind of the instability of a lot of governments at the moment and a lot of uncertainty seems to be shoving this pretty far down the track as well, and plus adding things like global warming and all the environment, it's which one do we pick? I mean, the argument could be that AI could save us environmentally, some of the advantages that it will give us. But no, I think it has to be high up in the agenda. And it is a very strange concept, because this really does have to involve the nerds, the non-nerds, and the politicians, and economics. It really is something, and I think that's what makes it so hard to grasp. It's like trying to grab jelly. It's everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And how do we, we as human beings, we're not particularly good at dealing with subjects that are manageable. So how do we deal with this, which is all encompassing?
Yeah, you'd be interested in this because you're interested in psychology, but I don't know what the study was. I'm not going to try and cite it. It's just anecdotal. There was a look at how we perceive our future selves, and the idea of the study was to discover how we relate to seeing ourselves in the future, and therefore how we can plan. Right?
Yes.
And as individuals and collectively, we're really bad at actually empathizing with our own future self. We're better actually at empathizing with other people in the present. And so that's why it's very hard to get people to plan for pensions and all this sort of stuff, because they can't picture themselves in 5, 10 or 15 years very easily. And they can't relate. It's almost like that's a totally different person. And so it's the same, I think, with this sort of thing. It's like, it's not just that we're stuck in the present. We can't picture ourselves in the situations that might be really problematic, let alone deal with ways of circumventing it. So these scenarios are too exotic at the moment. And until, sadly, I think there's more clarity on what the real issues are through, I hope not a big mishap, but some sort of like near miss moment where it's like, oh, actually, that
wake up call.
We might go, okay, well, actually, this is now a priority, and these are the tools that we can use to solve it. So that's my optimistic take on it.
I mean, I always like analogies as ways of kind of framing things, and I can't think, as you were speaking there, and something I do think about is I can't think of a similar analogy to AI and its potential impacts in the world that we can look at and say, okay, that was a similar challenge. You could say, okay, the internet, but that didn't really, it's different. It's not quite the same. And I can't think of something, because I think if you can do that, you can kind of hook into that and think, okay.
Well, we did touch on this briefly in the first episode, but we were talking about nuclear weapons as being analogous. And Suleiman's talked about this in the coming wave. The idea that what started out as completely unregulated, free-for-all, indiscriminate bombings of people, well, indiscriminate, very planned bombing, should I say, but that killed hundreds of thousands, and there was no cap on that. I mean, when you look at where the United States was at the end of World War II, it was like these nuclear weapons potentially could have been used by them anywhere. It's actually quite remarkable that they didn't just shut down any country they want and say with the threat of nuclear arms. They didn't, for whatever reason, which is quite a remarkable bit of history. But then all the way through to now, whether you think it's a success or not doesn't matter. They're highly regulated. Getting access to the materials to make them is difficult. And it's not quite analogous there, because these are very accessible tools. But the point is, we went from a totally unregulated use of nuclear weapons to a highly regulated non-use of weapons so far.
But I think that I see what you're saying, but it's still quite different in that a nuclear bomb was all about the kind of the end point of someone dropping that bomb, and
there were nation states. Only nation states could really
and only they could do it. Whereas AI is like oxygen. It's a strange thing to say, but it's everywhere, and in our work, in our play, in our interactions, it's
breathing in algorithms.
You're breathing in algorithms, and. That's the thing that I'm kind of struggling with in terms of how to find a similar analogy.
Oh, I see. In order to stop it, we'd have to stop taking oxygen, because our world is run using
so
this stuff.
As maybe something like, let's say they've now discovered that slowly within the next 5 years, the oxygen is going to turn into, I don't know, I'm not a chemist, but nitrogen, for example, in the atmosphere. What do we do? Because that is something that would absolutely impact every single thing that we do and every interaction that we have. And AI kind of feels like that. And it's so difficult to you can't grab oxygen, and you can't say, okay, well, I'm just going to have a bubble of my own oxygen that I'm going to breathe. Do you see what I mean? It's everywhere.
Okay. So again, we're screwed on that one.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But no, there's I think there is not so much that it's completely analogous to nuclear weapons
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much. What I'm saying is that seemed insurmountable then.
Yes.
As a, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be complacent and say, oh yeah, we've solved nuclear weapons.
no, I
Of
know what
course
you
not.
mean.
We've got some
Yes.
serious problems. But imagine a world without proliferation
Yeah,
treaties,
yeah.
right? So therefore, the things that are required to solve a problem with AI that we might or might not have
Yes.
would be equally ambitious.
Yes.
If not way more so.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I think we are yet to invent the kind of tools, not just regulation, but personally, I think more democracy,
Yes.
but at a universal level, right? We just don't have any platform for that.
As you're speaking and as I'm thinking, actually the closest thing to this is the environment. It's something that impacts everyone. It goes through to everyone. It's a global thing. It could potentially kill us all.
Yep.
You know, but we can't seem to be getting that right either. You know, in terms of okay, we might, you know, the UK I think is very good in terms of what it's doing.
Yep.
But then you've got China or India, and you know, just steaming ahead. You know, kind of. So maybe that's another close.
Yeah, it might be. And it might turn out that the tools that we put into place for CO2 emissions, for example, and how we work that out may be as dramatic and quick as we solve the tools for AI,
Yes.
if it's a problem based on a crisis.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back to that. I am pinching from The Fourth Turning is Here,
Yeah.
just out by Neil Howe.
Yeah.
If you've not read The Fourth Turning, which was his book written with a partner who died in the early 2000s, then you would not need to go back and read it because he goes over all of that again. But actually, he was talking about a lot of it was political.
Yeah.
And it is about, the US in particular, seen through the US eyes, but the fact that we go through these cycles and the ways that we create real innovation, and I don't just mean technological,
Yeah.
I mean social.
Yes.
And political through crises,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the optimistic thing, I think, was that it's possible that the crisis doesn't have to be incredibly dramatic. They
Yeah.
have been,
Yes.
but they don't have to be. So it might be that we just maybe we're better equipped this time round, perhaps because of AI, we're able to analyze things better and see possible outcomes. System dynamics is something I don't pretend I won't understand it at all. But using AI in system dynamics is giving scientists modeling tools
Yes.
for certain outcomes like climate change
Yeah,
and so on like that, and may be able to even self-analyze the sort of problems we might have politically and go, well, this is what happens if you...
Maybe it can solve its own problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The actually useful tech segment. Okay, Jamie, let's take a break and dive into one of our segments. This one is the actually useful segment.
Yeah.
All right. I would
Who'd have
like
thought
to...
Yes.
Finally.
Yes, finally. 3 episodes in, or 4, how many we are at.
Now, this one I lean very heavily on you. I will never, I don't think, be able to do this one justice, apart from maybe some little tools here and there. But you're the AI expert, so it'd be nice to know what tools you've discovered that you think might be actually useful for our listeners.
Yeah, okay, so this is a nice story about a friend of mine who has been using ChatGPT the way that most people have started using it for, doing LinkedIn posts and that type of thing. Unfortunately, her mother was unwell, and she had all these kind of oncology reports. And her mother is a little bit older, and she wanted to explain to her what they meant, and she didn't quite understand herself because it's all in this very medical language and a whole load of chemicals and all these kind
Egyptian,
of things.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's impossible to understand. So she uploaded them into ChatGPT, or typed it, copy and pasted the reports into ChatGPT, and asked it to explain it like as a layperson and in an empathic way. And she said actually the entire experience was fantastic because in a scary situation, she was able to understand what it meant. She had the time to digest it. If she had questions, she could ask back again, kind of to really...
I was going to say, that's the big thing, is like follow-up questions as well.
Yeah, because we've all been in those situations with doctors where you're like a rabbit in the headlights.
It's overwhelming, isn't it?
It's overwhelming, and it's only when you walk out you think of the questions. And she was able then to explain to her mum, kind of put her at ease and both of them at ease. And I just thought that was a lovely story of where... this scary thing of AI, which people are worried about, actually could be very helpful. So I think that's a nice story of AI. Good AI.
So we'll leave it on a hopeful note there.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Thank you.